A few years ago, the country learned something important about Fox News. While its hosts were pushing election fraud lies, they knew better. They knew that Trump's claims made no sense. That knowledge went all the way to the top. Of course, we could have guessed this, but having proof was different. It created a permanent record. We didn't learn this from whistleblowers. We learned it from legal action. Dominion Voting Systems sued Fox for making up conspiracy theories about its voting machines. As part of that lawsuit process, Dominion got discovery. So, internal messages came to light, and Fox settled before trial. Legal action is the best tool available for exposing corruption, lies, and internal disasters at agencies that claim to be giving us the news. That is a crucial lesson right now. There is a possibility that the New York Times will face a lawsuit. Ahead, I'll explain what that is. The possibility of a suit succeeding in court is very slim. The laws are very much on the side of news agencies. But the prospect of losing is not the thing that worries news agencies the most. It's discovery. It's a plaintiff getting a hold of internal messages and testimony proving that these news agencies are not what they claim to be, that they're not these stalwarts in a fight for truth, that they're aware they're violating basic journalistic standards in the rush to push claims that meet their agendas. Today, I'll take you through how that plays out now in the wake of a recent disastrous column. I'm in a very unusual position to tell you about this because I took legal action against my employer when I was at CNN, and I understood how important it is to news agencies to try to keep their dirty laundry hidden. Understanding that can be very powerful in pushing the media to shape up its act. Also today, big news that the New York Times and others hid altogether. It's difficult stuff to hear, but it's important. Kids in Gaza describe what Hamas does to them. Last week, I shared sound with you from Israeli women discussing sexual assault by Gazan terrorists. Men experience it too. You'll hear from a man describing what they did to him. Also today, why a taxpayer bailout is not a balanced budget. That seems so obvious, but the media isn't making it clear when it comes to what New York City just did. And then Memorial Day is coming up this weekend. I have an updated version of my Memorial Day episode for you. It's probably the most hypocritical day on the media's calendar. A day in which big mainstream news agencies say how much they venerate U.S. troops while simultaneously trashing their legacy and calling people today who do the exact same things the worst names possible. The media doesn't even try to hide this hypocrisy. But you and I here can take time to genuinely appreciate those who made the sacrifice to protect the freedoms we have. This show can only exist in a democracy. All that and more coming up today on They Stand Corrected. Hello and welcome. So great to have you here. I hope you're doing well. Maybe you're preparing for a trip this Memorial Day. Lots of people travel over that time. Hey, if you come from a military family, I have a message for you ahead. Oh, I should introduce myself. Hi, I'm Josh Levs, and this is my podcast, They Stand Corrected, which fact checks the news. You can learn lots about me at my website, joshlevs.com. Along with this show comes a newsletter filled with links, proof, images, and more. I don't expect you to take my word for anything. It's free. You should absolutely get it. You'll find a link in the show notes. It's something called Substack, and it has the same name as this show, They Stand Corrected. A great way to support this show is to become a paid subscriber to the newsletter. If you do that, you get extra content, including edited hyperlinked transcripts and a lot more. I always try to take a moment to thank one of the latest paid subscribers. So today, thank you to Winston Siegel from Toronto. Actually, I've been hearing from a bunch of people from Canada lately. Welcome to all of you. There are also subscribers now from Ukraine, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Romania, Algeria. So great to have all of you. In the newsletter, you'll see that one of the latest issues is about confusion that the media created involving New York City. New York City's Democratic Socialist Mayor Zohran Mamdani, he's someone I've reported on in the past. He has expressed his love for terror funders. He supports anti-Semitic groups and movements. Anyway, there were these reports claiming that he achieved a balanced budget and closed a multi-billion-dollar gap in the city. I heard from a bunch of listeners about that. That's just not what happened. The state provided billions of taxpayer dollars to the city to help them claim that the budget was somehow balanced. That's what a government bailout is, when other taxpayers give money to something. That's just what happened here. And you can see those details in the newsletter. New York City is also delaying pension payments that they're still going to have to pay. Even New York City's own comptroller, who's also a Democrat and wants to praise a fellow Democrat, even he wrote that this does not solve for the fact that the city continues to spend more than it takes in. So, short version, it is not a balanced budget. You won't learn that from left-wing media, but it is a fact. All right, let's dig into this. Recently, on ABC's The View, host Sunny Hostin was talking about how Tucker Carlson, formerly of Fox News, has now apologized, technically, for his role in boosting Trump. Here is something she said.
Remember when Fox News parted ways with him because of a $787 million settlement over at Dominion over those voting machines? Remember that whole scandal? Well, during that litigation in 2021, he texted someone and said that he hated Trump passionately. And then 2 years later, he said, I'm voting for Trump. And then in 2024, he endorsed him for president. And now all of a sudden, you want me to forgive you for this situation? No, thank you, Tucker Carlson.
Okay, so she referred to Dominion and voting machines. There was a lawsuit by Dominion in which they accused Fox of defamation for pushing all these wild conspiracy theories about a stolen election and their machines having been rigged or misused. Those claims were always preposterous. Even Fox chairman Rupert Murdoch called it really crazy stuff. This was at the same time that Fox was pushing it. Here's a clip from a New York Times podcast called The Daily.
As part of the lawsuit, it's able to get its hands on thousands and thousands of emails and text messages that Fox News producers, hosts, and executives were exchanging, in which you can see they really express doubt and in some cases outright scorn about the allegations that President Trump and his supporters were making about fraud in the 2020 election. For example, you had text messages from Tucker Carlson in which he mocks Trump. He calls his legal team and his campaign team incompetent. You also have skepticism from the chairman of the company himself, Rupert Murdoch, who is also casting doubt on these voter fraud claims that his network is still promoting at the time.
This is significant now. I reported last week on a terrible, nonsensical attack piece by New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof, who has a long record of getting so much wrong. He took what some untrustworthy people have claimed, including openly pro-Hamas people who are proven to have lied before, and he trusted them to make these outlandish allegations involving Israel systematically carrying out horrific sex crimes against Arab people identified as Palestinians in prisons, including bizarre stuff about dogs that animal science experts say aren't even possible. And the Times ran it as an opinion piece, not a news piece, which is their way of trying to give themselves an additional level of cover. Now, the Israeli government has said that it is exploring legal action against the Times. The initial reaction you get in a bunch of the media about this, when they even mention it, is that a lawsuit is very unlikely to lead to a victory, that a plaintiff in a case like that probably would not win. And that's true based on precedents. The laws in this country do a lot to protect news agencies. Some news agencies are already claiming that any lawsuit will fail, but that's premature because we don't know what the legal arguments would be, or even the jurisdictional questions, or whether it would seek to overturn some previous Supreme Court ruling. or whether legal action might be taken outside of the United States in another place where the Times sells its papers. We just don't know that yet, so there's nothing to analyze yet. I will note here that I did an episode about Hollywood. There was a lawsuit involving the New York Times and these Hollywood figures. In that episode, an attorney joined me to explain that there is a popular myth that truth is an absolute defense against libel. So a lot of people believe that as long as you say an accusation has been made, you can't be accused of libel or defamation. But that's not true. If someone, let's say, accuses you of murder and a news agency reports that you were accused of murder without pointing out that the person who made that accusation has serious credibility issues or shouldn't be trusted, maybe even admits that they were wrong, anything, it can still be libel. So just saying an accusation was made might be technically true, but can still be defamation or libel. It was attorney Ben Zapersky of Fordham Law School who joined me there. That was episode 41. If you haven't heard it, I encourage you to check it out. But probably even more important when it comes to what you and I are looking for, truth, is that winning isn't the only goal. What we would benefit from is discovery in the process. Transparency matters. News agencies live in fear of people finding out what goes on internally. How these news agencies know they're violating basic journalistic standards. How they know they don't have solidity behind certain reporting. People inside basically all the big news agencies have become sources for me here. I know that inside the Times, there are real journalists who were disgusted by what the paper did. But there's nothing public that's reportable so far demonstrating what went on internally. Discovery would rock. This is something to push for in general. Truth equals facts plus context. We need both to understand how these news giants engage in propaganda. When I took legal action against CNN's parent company, that was over discrimination in parental leave, and it led to lots of great things. I understood something that even a lot of lawyers don't, and that is that CNN and its parent company would not want to get to a stage in which discovery would allow the exposure of internal stuff about how it works. This is true across news agencies. These agencies are always pushing people at big, powerful businesses to become whistleblowers. But when anyone tries to release information from inside their own companies, they freak out. And these news agencies love reporting on information that gets released through discovery when it comes to other companies like Fox, but are terrified of the same thing happening to them. The more we can put out there, the better off we are. That is part of the fight for truth. Speaking of that, this Kristof piece ran just before Israel released an extensive report on sexual assault carried out by Gazan terrorists of Hamas. The Israeli government noted that it had offered the Times advance access to the report, but the Times wasn't interested. And then, what a coincidence, the Times ran this Kristof thing right before the report was released. The Times then put out a statement claiming that it was just a coincidence and that they didn't know when that report would come out. But that statement makes no sense. When a news agency is offered something in advance, one of the first things it does is find out when something will be released so that you can run your report then. CNN ran a report that was prepared right when that report by the Civil Commission in Israel was released. So obviously CNN was able to find out when this report would come out. New York Times could surely have done the same thing. Embargoes are a standard practice. Meanwhile, the New York Times is saying, hey, well, we did report on that study after it came out. Here's something the Times isn't telling you. That report from the Civil Commission is filled with extensive details, evidence, proof, all kinds of things. There are people speaking on videos. There's so much solidity to it. The Times slapped together a report of about 1,500 words. Meanwhile, that Kristof thing, this non-journalistic fiasco with no trustworthy sources, no evidence, no proof of any kind, reserved for the opinion section, how much space did that one get? More than 3,500 words. This isn't complicated. The Times chose to do this. Of course it did. I explained last week that there's tons of stuff the Times refuses to report on at all. And here's more. The Daily Mail got this from Jusur News. That is an Arab language news outlet based in the United States, which means it has actual democratic protections. They managed to get interviews with kids in Gaza. They have to be very careful getting this stuff because Hamas controls Gaza and doesn't let people tell the truth. But this group did manage to sneak out some interviews. I'll tell you what they say in English. It's very difficult stuff to hear, but we all should. Here's a clip. This boy is saying he took me to the restrooms and undressed me, took off my pants and had his way with me. I started to scream and then I cried. There's a bunch of descriptions. This family explains that when this boy dared to tell his family what had happened, this Hamas guy went to their home and said, if you utter another word, we'll shoot you in the legs and beat you to death and wipe you off the face of the earth. Another guy explains that his son was molested by an imam. There's a former Palestinian Authority security officer who explains that Hamas clerics use rape as a tactic to coerce young boys and their families to remain obedient and submissive to Hamas. And I told you last week about Israeli women and girls describing how they were raped by Hamas and other Gazan terrorists after being taken on October 7th. But the Daily Mail, which had the stuff I just told you about, they also have this. A male Israeli victim describing his rape by Hamas at the Nova Music Festival. He says that they stripped him and started to do these unspeakable things to him and his body. They were raping him. He says, at that moment, I am like a doll to them. I am their Jewish doll. The New York Times and other big media don't have any desire to tell you about this. Why is that? Well, their agenda is open and clear, but their internal decision-making remains in the shadows. We need to know more about that, and we could through discovery in legal action. Even if this effort that Israel is talking about does not manage to get that far, maybe another one will. Discovery is needed. The media is a pillar of democracy. When the media fails, it helps democracy fail. That is something we all need to recognize, especially on Memorial Day coming up.
Extra, extra, we do about it.
News used to spread like this.
Extra, extra, we do about it.
But in this era, it comes at us from all directions all day long.
Some breaking news.
Officials are investigating.
Breaking news.
More updates coming soon.
And so many people are weighing in with opinions and theories, spewing uninformed nonsense all around us. It's like we're caught in this cacophony of noise. Big media is a big part of the problem. They're getting more desperate to be heard in all that noise and setting aside journalism to say, hey, pay attention to us over here. Humans are not designed to be overwhelmed with information like this. It's mentally unhealthy. This show aims to end that. I think of it like coming along with a triangle and saying, let's all take a deep breath and focus on truth. For this block of time, all that noise is gone. Together, we focus on facts plus context, so we can make decisions in the world based on what's really going on, not what liars want us to believe. That is the blueprint for every episode I produce. If you value that formula and believe it should reach more people, please consider supporting the show at whatever level works for you. Find out how at the link in the show notes or at my website, joshlebs.com. Your support makes all this work possible. Ever since I launched this show, my engineer, Don, has said to me, you've had so much good content. You should do some kind of re-air or revisiting an episode at some point. And I've always said, I should, you're right. But there's always so much new stuff for me to correct. But now that Memorial Day is coming up, it is time to revisit this episode I did for you about Memorial Day, because it's got to be the most hypocritical day of the year for the media. Here is an updated, partial version of what I've reported on in the past about Memorial Day, and then I'll come back with another message right after it. Every Memorial Day, the media talks about slain U.S. service members as heroes. And that makes sense. What so many did was heroic. I talked about this when I was on CNN. The people who get the most heroic treatment from the media are those who fought in World War II. On Memorial Day, Veterans Day, and at times throughout the year, we are told of their achievements. Like, here are clips from 3 different reports on NPR.
Tad Nagaki was an American hero, and I can never say enough thank yous.
How did your dad deal with his status as a hero, a hero of the greatest battle of the Pacific?
Doris Dory Miller was one of the first American heroes of World War II.
But if we take a step back and look at the big picture of what today's media is doing, then we can immediately see how hypocritical these reports are. Here's what the media should stop to really think about on Memorial Day and throughout the year. I do all the time. What did these folks risk their lives for? The ones we remember on Memorial Day, what did they die for? It wasn't just to protect the United States, it was to protect the United States as a free and democratic nation. It was to protect freedom and democracy. Memorial Day isn't just about remembering, it's about honoring them. The media's lip service to them, in between reports that fuel anti-democratic forces, those do not honor these heroes. It's up to us in every generation to carry on the legacy, to keep fighting for what they fought for, fighting in the public square, fighting through language, fighting by rejecting anti-democratic movements and ideas from all sides. I went and looked at what the president was saying before the United States got involved in World War II. This was a powerful talk. It was called a fireside chat from FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. In 1940, he was pushing for the country to support nations in Europe as they tried to fend off the Nazis.
The history of recent years proves that the shootings and the chains and the concentration camps are not simply the trenchant tools, but the very altars of modern dictatorships. They may talk of a new order in the world, but what they have in mind is only a revival of the oldest and the worst tyranny.
That description could largely apply to anti-democratic forces of today as well. Russia fought against the Nazis in World War II, but then under communist rule was an authoritarian nightmare that killed millions of people. Now Russia has been trying to overtake Ukraine and extend its powers, and there's Iran, the epicenter of global Islamist terrorism. Now, I'll emphasize, FDR did not do everything right. He turned away Jewish refugees. He put Japanese people into internment camps. This is not about whitewashing his history, but on this, he spoke eloquently.
We must be the great arsenal of democracy.
FDR also talked about how there were people in the United States trying to prevent America from supporting democracies under attack.
They tried to reawaken long slumbering racial and religious enmities, which should have no place in this country. They are active in every group that promotes intolerance. They exploit for their own ends our own natural abhorrence of war. These trouble breeders have but one purpose. It is to divide our people, to divide them into hostile groups, and to destroy our unity and shatter our will to defend ourselves. Some of them even suggest that we should imitate the methods of the dictatorships. But Americans never can and never will do that.
Oh boy, I heard that and I was like, if only he knew where we would be 85 years later. I'll tell you about my visit to the site where Hitler had those hellish propaganda rallies immortalized in old Riefenstahl films. That's coming up.
This is an absolutely amazing podcast. Josh Levs is a treasure and a wonderful source of information.
I just wanted to thank you for They Stand Corrected. It's just fantastic. Thank you for these tools and for your incredible work here.
If you are not listening to They Stand Corrected weekly, then you are doing yourself a disservice. Never before has a podcast like this been so necessary. Josh, keep up the good work.
I absolutely love your podcast.
I love what you're doing to prevent the democracy demolition of 24/7 toxic disinformation.
It's a highlight of my week every time it comes out because I know I'm going to learn something. You have made me a much more educated consumer of news.
Thank you so much to everyone sending in messages like this. To find out how you can do the same, get in touch. There's a form that's free and available to anyone to fill out. It's linked in the show notes. In the 1930s and the 1940s, there were people around the world, including right here in the United States, who thought the Nazis were the good guys. You know, they were socialists, National Socialists. But the people who understood the truth, the facts, knew better. They regretted not having taken much stronger action against Germany after World War I, because the failure to take those stronger actions allowed Nazism to grow, metastasize. In 1940, when FDR was doing this fireside chat, he understood that Nazism had to be defeated.
The experience of the past 2 years has proven beyond doubt that no nation can appease the Nazis. No man can tame a tiger into a kitten by stroking it. There can be no appeasement with ruthlessness.
A year later, Pearl Harbor happened and the United States entered the war. But even before that, this speech shows FDR understood the only way to defeat Nazism is to actually defeat it. Russia should be defeated now in Ukraine so that it sees it cannot go take over a neighboring democracy. Hamas must be defeated and dismantled thoroughly to show that Islamist terrorism against a democracy will not be rewarded, will not be allowed. The version of Islamist terrorism that emerged in the 20th century is based on a mix of two things: centuries of Muslim attacks against Jews, the people of Israel, people of Judea, and Nazism. In episode 44, I shared this clip from author David Dallion.
The alliance between Adolf Hitler and the Muslim fundamentalist world was actually initiated and forged by the Grand Mufti at the very beginning of the new Nazi regime. Several of the Arab political parties founded during the 1930s were modeled after the Nazi Party. This is often forgotten by historians.
He goes into how Nazi materials, including Mein Kampf, were distributed widely and treated as fact throughout the Arab and Muslim world. And here's a talk from Edwin Black, another author. He wrote a book called The Farhud, Roots of the Arab-Nazi Alliance in the Holocaust.
A group of people that were dwelling in a land for 2,600 years, the Jews of Mesopotamia, of Iraq, 1,000 years before Muhammad, came to be considered vermin, Untermenschen, which is German for subhuman. The alliance went into the battlefield. The Muslim forces of the Third Reich were Waffen-SS units dispatched all over Europe.
The World War II heroes the media talks about, they fought these folks. They fought these Islamists. Has any news agency told you this? Almost surely not, because big mainstream news organizations are portraying the modern versions of these groups as these poor, downtrodden innocents who are victims of big bad bombings by a democracy. The hypocrisy here is off the charts. Journalists keep talking about the heroism of the military in World War II. Well, millions of civilians were killed in that war. In bombing Germany, the Allied forces killed hundreds of thousands of civilians, including tons of children. I visited Nuremberg on a journalism program. I went to the stadium that you may have seen in Triumph of the Will, a Nazi propaganda movie from hell. It's now a modern soccer stadium in a democracy. While I was in Nuremberg, I saw numerous sites that were destroyed in bombings by Allied forces. Here is a clip from a talk I gave this past October 7th.
And when I was standing there, I imagined a beautiful Aryan child, 3 years old maybe, looking to the sky and seeing bombs fall, and that being the last thing this Aryan child ever saw. It is sick and depraved what humanity does. It's so awful. And none of that makes what the Allied forces did anything less than heroic. They were fighting against Nazism. They were responding to this horror.
In the wake of World War II, democracy took off around the world. West Germany and eventually Germany became a democracy. India was founded as a democracy in 1950. In the Middle East, Arab nations were born but did not choose democracy. Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, all founded in 1946 by the same act of decolonization that led to the foundation of Israel. Amid all this, the founders of Israel, amazingly, chose to be a democracy. It took a defensive war to establish that democracy, too. I think all the time about U.S. service members who paved the way for the freedoms we have in the United States. For my freedom to do this, to communicate with you, unafraid that the government will come punish me, or that my neighbors will turn me into some Gestapo or KGB or Islamist force and try to kill me for it. On Memorial Day, we commemorate all service members who died during times of war and peace to protect our way of life, to protect freedom and democracy. Sergeant Jason Covey of the U.S. Air Force playing taps at Culpeper National Cemetery in Virginia. To all who fought for our country, thank you, and you are remembered. To everyone who lost someone in that fight, thank you as well. I hope all of you have a terrific Memorial Day weekend. Let me know when you see the hypocrisy that I'm talking about in the media. There are two great ways to reach me. The best is through the newsletter. The second is through a form at my website. Oh, it's also an American tradition to have sales over Memorial Day. So I have special patriotic level discounts for people who become paid subscribers to the newsletter. Be sure to check those out right now. As always, thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.